Happy Wednesday, guys. We are here to talk about stress. And if you are a member of our FitMom community, if you follow us at all, Liz and I talk a lot about stress. And what we're going to talk about today is probably the reason that Liz and I have not died yet running a company. Because the type of stress that we manage is considered an adaptive stress.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about kind of the difference between adaptive versus non-adaptive, the negative impact that stress has on the body and the brain in particular. For those of you that wear your stress as a badge of honor, you might want to take a listen because there's a lot of stuff that stress does that is no bueno.
Yeah. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while, we've talked about this in other ways, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about how you talk to yourself. We've talked about, reframing negative thoughts. We've talked about if you thrive off of stress or, you just love feeling high strung all the time. We've just talked about this in a few different ways. And I think it's important for us to all understand, like, there's good stress and then there's not so great stress, right? And I'm sure that you feel that in different ways in your life, but we need to understand like the physical repercussions and kind of how this happens, in the body, especially your brain. So thoughts, we know thoughts come in and go, right? They're things. We're with ourselves 24/7 and we have trillions of thoughts a day, but they can heal us or they can harm us. And following our thoughts are our beliefs, right? There's a reason why we have the thoughts that we do. They stem from somewhere. They stem from our belief. They stem from the stories that we tell ourselves. And it's not just a figurative kind of metaphor for what happens, but your brain literally stiffens, slows, and loses its function in direct relationship to those thoughts that you have, your beliefs, and your attitude. I think that's one that I want to touch on a little bit more in depth today, because you have a positive attitude, right? That glass half full, or you have that kind of negative attitude, glass half empty, right? And so this also in turn impacts how you think about you and your place in the world. And so how each of us respond to life, like our perceptions, has a huge implication for how we feel, how we age, and the health of our brain. And so that's one thing that we kind of want to talk through today in terms of how you look at stress. And it might be a good idea for you, whether or not you do it while you're listening to the podcast or after, set some time aside and write down an entire list of the things that stress you out day to day, and then decide if they are either adaptive or non-adaptive after you listen to this today.
Yeah. Like, I think of especially the people that struggle to slow down. Like, if you struggle to sit and do nothing and like sit and watch Netflix or go to the beach and spend a day just doing nothing, you need to start paying attention. So really interesting. Other than eating breakfast regularly and eating more fruits and vegetables, the one characteristic that is present in all healthy older people is resiliency. So resiliency is kind of hard to measure. Like, it's a hard to measure quality in people. But essentially it is the ability to adapt to change, to like shift with the changing tides in life, the different things that happen, rather than drowning. Rather than, like Liz was saying, seeing the glass half empty or half, versus half full, knowing how to turn lemon into lemonade, like all of those things, it is how we perceive the world. And I think that it is very easy to get stuck in that place where like everything becomes a negative just automatically. It is just, as soon as you start thinking about something, as soon as something happens, as soon as a situation happens, you think of the negative. And the thing is, these thoughts have very real, measurable effects on the body and the brain. In fact, every cell in your body listens to your thoughts. Every cell. So your immune system knows your deepest feelings. Your stem cells that are wired to your brain help repair and regenerate, but they only can turn on and make new brain cells when you relax, when you are able to decompress. And here's the thing. Like, we don't need embryos. You don't need, injections to make these things work. We have to be able to relax. And research has shown over and over again, learning to relax is one of the most important things when it comes to vitality and long-term health. And like, you guys, we need to learn how to hit the pause button. And the pause button isn't the one thing. And Liz and I hear this a lot. Well, my glass of wine at night. When I sit, with my husband, maybe the conversation you have with your husband, absolutely, that can be like a relaxing thing depending on what you're talking about. But it is like you having your glass of Cabernet and sitting and watching Netflix is not relaxing, guys. It has to do with how we are truly stimulating something known as the vagus nerve, which Liz is going to talk about, but you have to get your body into a sympathetic state. And I'm sorry, alcohol isn't the way to do it.
Yes. So we always talk about like the parasympathetic state and sympathetic state, right? We want to trigger this rest and digest parasympathetic state because we need to sit down and chill the F out sometimes, right? Yeah. Like we just can't keep going like the Energizer Bunny. At some point in time, you experience that burnout. You hit that wall and you crash hard. We see it all the time. So your immune cells, your stem cells, and again, all of the other organs in your body are connected to something known as your vagus nerve. Okay. So that is a long nerve from your brain through your chest and your diaphragm and throughout your body. So we talk a lot with our clients around how can we stimulate this vagus nerve because it serves so many purpose in the body. And it's part of your nervous system essentially that helps you be able to calm your mind down and turn on a cascade of healing that can reverse depression and dementia. It can help sharpen your mind, make old brains young again, right? Think about all of those people who exercise regularly. They eat pretty well. Let's say fairly well. I'm thinking of my dad. He's 83. He exercises every day. He eats pretty well and he lives an active lifestyle, even outside of, the gym. He struggles to kind of calm down, but he's very, very patient. And to me, that is resilient because he's got the patience of like no one else that I know. And he's 83. He's thriving. He's, living life still, traveling, doing all the things that he wants to do. And he's, for the most part, pretty sharp. And I think this is one thing that I will say for him is that he does a really good job in any heightened situation to stay calm and to keep everybody like chill, which is crazy to me because I feel like today most people don't do that, but I do look up to a lot of people who are older and I see that characteristic in them. And so we have to start to hit the pause button. And so in the day to day, how do we do that? Well, number one is we need to, as Becca said, kind of chill out. And it's not your glass of wine, but there's other things that we can do and stimulate your nerve or your vagus nerve to help your body just sensitize that calming feeling. And so one of the things that like we'll have our clients do, there's a few ways that you can kind of stimulate the vagus nerve. Some of them aren't so, fun, such as coffee enemas or gagging reflex, things like that. But you can hum, you can sing loudly, you can, work on just your mindfulness and sitting down and doing some really intentional deep breathing practices to stimulate the body to get into that parasympathetic rest and digest, which most people have trouble doing.
Yeah. And we have an extensive list we're going to run through in just a second, but like we need to understand that if we do not address the stress, it can become a serious health concern for a lot of people. And it's not one of those things that like tomorrow you're going to die from, but it's a micro dose thing. It's one of those things that each day, because you guys, let's be honest, like very few of us know how to calm ourselves down. We know how to excite ourselves. We know we run into stress every single day, day after day. Our stress response is constant, which is one of the big problems. And like stress is the root of all disease, in my opinion. And I will argue it until I die, but it is literally the root of every disease out there, every sickness. And so the effects of stress on the brain like cannot be overstated. It shrinks the hippocampus with the memory center of the brain. It reduces serotonin, which is our feel-good hormone. It lowers BDNF, which is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts kind of like Miracle-Gro for your brain cells. It increases inflammation. It increases belly fat, lowers thyroid function, and a lot more. It's one of the chief causes of this like broken brain, this stress that is constant. So we need to understand kind of like what is stress? Because I think that a lot of people struggle like, well, stress is just there. Like it's hard to quantify for a lot of people. So stress is basically a stress response within the body. So there can be stress, but if you are good at managing stress and you're good at understanding how to calm your body down, stress doesn't impact you the same way. So how we define stress is basically the biochemistry that governs the stress response reacts the same when you're in real danger. For example, you're about to be run over by a car, real danger. It reacts the same as it does if there is potential danger or perceived danger, I should say. So like you think your spouse is angry at you, or like you think your boyfriend's going to break up with you or mad at you. So in both cases, there is danger perceived. In one case, there's actual danger. The car may be running you over. In the other case, there actually isn't danger there. Okay. But it's how we perceive it that becomes the problem. And so in both of these cases, the same physical response happens. There's a flood of cortisol and other chemicals, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and they get released into your bloodstream. And these chemicals kind of send messages all over the body, telling your body and your brain to get ready for danger at hand. In the first situation, you potentially could get run over by a car. This stress is helpful. It is adaptive in nature. It can help you run away faster. It can help you escape that danger. In the second instance, the stress response is basically useless. It's worse than useless because it's causing a problem to the body without actually having a problem exist. So your body prepares for real physical danger, in the case of being run over by a car, but it's just the perceived danger, the fear that we have of, I think that my husband's mad at me. I think that my friend's mad at me or whatever. And, the result is we still get all these stress juices, and they kind of poison the body and the brain because they become chronic. That is the problem with chronic perceived stress. When you always feel that like heart fluttering, when you always feel nervous, when you always feel anxious, those are physical responses from the body having the stress response.
Yeah. And I think some of them are totally mental and kind of made up, and
some of them are justified. I will say, like, there is, you lose a loved one. Like there's a stress response.
Absolutely.
For these things.
I'm saying about like, if you are just like making up things because you're worrying and you're feeling like anxious,
you always see the worst case scenario happening.
Yeah. And like, so you mentioned, I've used this analogy before, but let's say you get an email from your boss, right? And it's like, Becca, I need to see you at 2 p.m. And you're like, well, okay, well, that wasn't on my calendar. This is kind of urgent. Like, what's going on? All of a sudden you start to think like, am I going to get fired today? And then you spiral from there. Like if I get fired, then I, can't pay my bills. If I can't pay my bills, I lose my house, and like all of these things that really are made up. And so that's kind of a form of, definitely anxiety, I think. But this is also how we have to start to take control of these thoughts and like slow down, hit that pause button, ask ourselves, like, is this true? And how can I kind of start to reframe and shift these things instead of letting, that time between 10 a.m. when you got the email and 2 p.m. that meeting with your boss, you're just spiraling and you're in that chronic state of stress the entire time. So again, that's kind of an extreme example there, but we do have to start to take a look at what is our true stress in life and what are some of these other stressors that we are just mentally perceiving. Okay. So this is where we want to kind of talk about like that adaptive and non-adaptive stress. So adaptive stress, as Becca was saying, like it serves a purpose. It's not always a bad thing, So again, if you were thinking that you were going to be hit by a car, like your stress response steps in and you move out of the way, right? You jerk the car over, or there's a car coming and you're walking across the street. You start to run a little bit faster. Like you get that kind of like fire on your butt, right? To react to that. But then we have non-adaptive stress, which is, I would say, like, this is the bad stress, right? These are the things
these are usually chronic.
We cannot handle well. And so like Becca was saying in the beginning of this, we were talking offline. It's like, okay, with our mentors, they always talk about how we're managing stress and kind of going through like, our stress list and the day-to-day task and what can you delegate? What can you stop doing? What can you say no to and ask for help with? Things like that. And it's one of those things where we're in a place right now where it's adaptive stress because it's a good stress. We're excited about what we're doing. Like we love creating the content.
It's rewarding.
It's very rewarding. Yeah. Yep. But on the flip side of that, like this non-adaptive stress, let's think an extreme here. Like this might be a horrible relationship that you just continue to stay stuck in. It might be going through a divorce, like something that is very, very hard in life, loss of a loved one, miscarriages, all of those things. And so this is where, we have to start to look at how are we perceiving these things and how are we, viewing these things? Because we can have adaptive stress, but make it non-adaptive if we perceive it that way. If we complain every single day, like, I have to do this today. I worked so many hours this week, right? And we just complain about these things rather than saying like, I get to do X, Y, or Z. I get to talk to 10 clients today. I get to podcast. I get to go to the park with my son. Rather than looking at it as all bad and negative, that is where it turns into that non-adaptive, bad chronic stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some things like physically that you can do that can cause that are like adaptive stress. If you think of in the sense of like cellular autophagy and turnover. So like high intensity interval training is an adaptive stress. Your body gets stronger. Resistance training, lifting heavier. Your body gets stronger. It's able to tolerate more. Same thing with fasting to an extent. We're very careful to talk about fasting because fasting is kind of it gets taken too far. I'll say that. But believe it or not, the only true like adaptive stress fasting situations are 24 to 36 hours. I think there's a threshold. I cannot remember what the actual hour time frame is. But it's over 24 hours to where like you're actually creating cellular autophagy and turnover benefit. Short-term fasting, 16-hour fast, stuff like that. Sure, it can serve a population, but it's definitely not the first route we take with clients. So, it can be actually detrimental for some people, especially if you have low blood sugar. So those are examples of like physical stress. And like Liz was saying, the non-adaptive stress is the stuff that it is usually perceived stress and it is not helpful to you or your body. Mm-hmm. It is a mindset usually. It is chronic usually. And so here's the one thing I will say. If you evaluate your day-to-day, and you're like, I can't get rid of a lot of these. This is just like my job, my kids, like these things are stressors, but they're not going anywhere. I can't delegate my kids, right? In some ways you can, I'll say that. But at the end of the day, like you can't get rid of them. If you truly have these stresses on your plate that are causing damage physically maybe, but you cannot remove them, then you need to add in more good. It is basically, we need to create this equalization in terms of bad stress and good stuff for the body to be able to have a good balance.
Think about it as like drains and charges.
Yes,
like what's
absolutely.
Charging you up and what's draining your battery, and how can we bring those things closer together to find that balance? Because we know there's always going to be things that are draining us day to day. There's going to be comments that people make. There's going to be, financial stress. There's just going to always be different things throughout the day that drain you. Sometimes people are exhausting.
Yeah.
Like standing in line at the Starbucks, and you hear the person behind you just complaining or...
Oh, and you know those people. Like, the people that you're like, I don't want to talk to this person, or I don't want to call that person, or your aunt or your in-law or whatever that like, you never want to answer the phone when they call. Like, those people. Mm-hmm. You do not want to be one of those people. And you don't want to be in contact with those people very much because they drain you too. Yeah. Like that is, we talk about toxic relationships all the time. And that is absolutely what it does. Is it like, I never get off the phone with one of those people in a good mind space. I'm getting off the phone like, ugh, I'm tired now, Yeah. And so we need to be able to balance that. We need to be able to have that more. If you are so stressed, guess what? Now you got to work harder on bringing in more good, because you will not remove these stresses because maybe we can't. So now we have to add and add and add. And that is how a lot of, honestly, in my opinion, a lot of really successful people that are, they're busy. You know that people running multi-billion dollar companies are not, lacking things to do. They meditate. We've talked about this before on another podcast. I don't remember which one, but how top successful people and, people that are running like huge companies, the common things that they do, they wake up early and exercise. They make time for meditation. They make time for, breaks throughout the day, because you can't be like, they do all of these things knowing to function at a high level and not have that be so negative to the body. You have to have these good things in there.
Yeah. You know what else they do? They eat good food, because they know that they need good energy and good fuel to fuel their brains, right? And their body throughout the day. They also prioritize sleep, and they say no to social functions. Huge. When you have 18 people asking you if you want to do something on the weekend and you haven't had a weekend off in the last, I was going to say year, but I forgot last year was COVID. You get my point. Like sometimes you just need to say no, and you need to have that night to yourself. And, I think one of the most impactful things that anyone can and should do is take a technology break. Like if you're always on social media, if you're always on your computer, if you're always on your email, checking your email, reading the news, like Googling stupid shit, like you're wasting time, number one. And number two, most likely you are causing more stress because either there's a comparison to someone else on social media, you feel bad about your life and where you're at, or you're reading the news, which that's just depressing, And then if you're just scrolling and you're kind of like mindless, okay, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you're still not signaling your body to get into the parasympathetic rest and digest state. Mm-hmm. Like scrolling on social media is not a way to downregulate your stress.
It's not. It's not.
technology break, that's my number one. And I really try to do that. I've been trying to do that a lot on Sundays. I'm not super great at it, but at least for a few hours and getting away from the phone and the tech.
Yeah. We also talk about grounding a lot. Walking barefoot in nature, in the grass for 10, 15, 20 minutes can be really beneficial to the body, actually. Deep breathing. So even if you struggle with like actual meditation, which is another great one, guided meditation is very helpful. Doing deep breathing exercises. So nasal breathing is actually really, really helpful. And you can do this by just sticking your tongue on the top of your mouth, closing your mouth and breathing only through the nose. Nasal breathing exercise can be really helpful. So like lower steady state cardio for 10, 15 minute intervals, stuff like that. Doing only nasal, can increase your aerobic capacity, increase, the ability to get into that parasympathetic state. Reading and journaling are great. We love, being able to kind of disconnect and get your mind to like a different world to an extent. And then releasing a lot of feelings through journaling can be really helpful.
Yeah. I think too, for some people who struggle with that meditation, like you could try guided meditation, like 10 or 15 minutes with an app. We like Calm. I know there's Breathe, there's Balance. There's all kinds of them out there.
Or something like that.
Headspace, I think.
Headspace. Yep.
But here's that I wanted to say about the deep breathing. If you struggle to take a deep breath, like you physically feel like you cannot take a deep breath, you need to prioritize doing this 10 times or 2 to 3 times a day with 10 deep breaths back to back. It takes less than 2 minutes. You have 6 minutes throughout your day. And I always tell clients, do this when you feel the most charged. So if you hate your job and you're driving to work and you're like, oh my God, I got to go in here and see my coworker again and blah, blah, blah. Before you go in, take 10 deep breaths. Sit in your car in the quiet, 10 deep breaths, get yourself into a better headspace, then go in. And then maybe you do it at lunchtime and maybe you do it, after work. One of the things that I've been trying to do is I give myself 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the day where I just collect myself. I either listen to music, I do some deep breathing, or I do something that gets me out of that mindset from all of the other things that we've, have on our plate to do before I see Marcus and before I, sit down for dinner. Because I think all the time there's just so many different, especially for us with like Facebook messages and Instagram messages and emails and all those things. I try to figure out a way, like, how can I kind of shut this off and get myself into a different emotional state? And that large in part starts with how you feel physically. And so if you feel physically stressed, anxious, heart racing, you need to start doing that deep breathing a couple times a day. The other thing I would say that I love to do, I mentioned this already, is either walking in nature or listening to music. Both of those things always get my batteries charged up, especially if I'm belting out some Kelly Clarkson or some Adele. Yeah,
singing, humming, connecting with friends, like going to lunch with friends, or, taking a girls' night, or watching a comedy and laughing more. Like, laughing has been proven in lots of research to show the benefits for neurotransmitter production. Like, you truly cannot create stress hormones when you are laughing. Prioritizing and understanding where your energy is best used. This is huge, guys. Like, this is probably what I would say our biggest struggle as business owners is like delegating things that we shouldn't be doing and spending time on and stressing over. And, I think that there's definitely a time and a place where, yes, you have to do the hard things. You have to do the things you don't want to do because it's just part of the job. But there's also a time and a place where, like, you can delegate those things. Saying no to things more often, like Liz was saying, weekend plans, helping a friend move, like, oh, hey, can you talk on the phone real fast? I was hoping I could talk to you about something. And then it's 30 minutes of them complaining to you. Like, we need to know that we are important and our time is important and it cannot be abused by people. Okay.
If you struggle to say no, you have to read the book, Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
The best book, hands down, for learning to say no.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that I was reading it on our honeymoon and I was like, God, I wish I would have read this before we got married. Like, there's so many things in there that was like wedding related at that time where she's like, you got to stop giving a fuck about how you place everybody at the tables. Like, they're adults. They can sit their own ass down at your wedding wherever they want. And I was
exactly.
And I didn't do a seating chart. I'm like, that's so true. I'm so glad I didn't waste time, because at that time I had a couple of their friends getting married and that was one of their biggest stressors and also their biggest argument with their spouse. Like, who was going to sit next to Joe, and like, how are you going to kick out this guy from the table because there's 9 of our college friends coming? You know what I mean? It's just funny.
Yeah.
But that book I do recommend if you struggle to say no and you feel like you care too much about things that you just don't really need to care about. highly recommend that book. I'll
Yeah.
put the link in the show notes for our Amazon shop because that has that book on there.
Yeah. Volunteering, like filling your cup. I think this is a big one that people don't think about a lot, but like complimenting people too, like making it a point in your day to compliment a couple people, because who doesn't love a compliment? Like I was, I even remember, I think it was like a month ago, there was a mom leaving Carson's daycare and she's like, girl, you look so good pregnant. I did not look that good pregnant. And like, it made my day, And so being able to make someone's day, and then you feel better too for giving that compliment. So I think and they don't happen anymore, especially now. People like don't even talk to each other outside. It's ridiculous.
Because they think you got the vid.
I know, but
research actually shows that it's a boost for your immune system when you give it to someone and their immune system
when they receive it.
Yep. So that's our challenge every day this week, every day next month, whatever, every day of your life. If you see somebody, Andy Frisella, he has it in one of his 75 hard challenges.
Yeah.
I believe it's phase 3, but you have to meet with somebody and give someone a compliment every day. And I love that because I think you feel good after you do it because you haven't done it in so long and you're like, man, I kind of been a jerk,
I know,
I should do this. Like I was at Starbucks this morning getting our coffee and the guy was so nice.
I love the nice. That makes me so happy. I think I know the guy that you're talking about. If it's at your Starbucks, yeah, he just makes my day.
He does.
Like people that are just so overly, and that's what I always think about is my friend Marty. He's an older guy. He's like 45 or 50 maybe now. But he used to go to O'Hare CrossFit when we coached there. You always wanted Marty in class. Like he made everyone happy. He was like electrifying to be in a room. And that is what you want. Like you can't be mad being that person. You can't. Like he is going to live forever. He drinks like a fish and he is probably going to live forever because he has so much good flowing through his body.
He's using his alcohol as his de-stress and he's chill all the time. That's funny because it reminds me of a girl that I went to high school with and she was always just smiling. She could be extremely mad about something and she would still have a smile on your face. It was like the weirdest thing ever. She was super sweet. But okay, other things. Workouts. You guys know Becca and I talk about, balancing your workouts, having a good routine, not overtraining and running your body to the ground, but getting workouts in. And we ask our clients, what are things that make you feel good day to day, week to week? What are the things that make you feel happy and confident and proud because you took the time and you showed up for yourself? And 9 times out of 10, working out at least 2 to 3 days a week is always on their list because they get that endorphin high. You feel so good. You feel so accomplished. You feel empowered, especially as a woman when you're lifting heavy shit. Like you just feel good. The other thing too is like yoga practice can be really beneficial. I have to say, I wish I had a yoga studio here that I need like a 30-minute yoga. I can't do the like hour to hour and a half yoga classes. I need like a 30-minute yoga and a good deep stretch. But yoga can be also very meditative, very calming. And one thing I like about doing that practice is if you've ever gone to a yoga class, like there's no phones in the studio. It's kind of, lower lighting and it just kind of forces you to really step away from reality and get away from all of the other inputs again. So taking that break, unlike when you go to the gym and you're running on the treadmill and you're, playing with your phone, checking social media, changing the music. I do this when, I'm in the garage, I got to video my workouts, then Becca will text me and then I got to change the Spotify. And it's like not really the hour that I need to like actually decompress. So there are other forms of, workouts that I think you should definitely work in here and there as a form of de-stressing.
Yeah. Pray into like, if you're religious, praying, reading the Bible, Liz and I are both religious. This is something I do every night before bed.
Going to church too.
Yeah. We've been, Nick and I found a church by us that we love. If you follow my Instagram, you've seen my child dancing at church. Cause I grew up Catholic, and it was very, normal Catholic church. Masses were an hour long. They were very structured, to me, very boring. And Nick grew up Lutheran and we found a non-denominational church out by us and it's just perfect for our family. Like I love the pastors. I love the community. They are, have amazing kid stuff. They have awesome music. And it's just like perfect for us. And it has totally renewed, my drive to want to go to church again. If there's a lot of like just anger, anxiety, stress, and you can't really figure out where it's coming from or like when it started or what seems to drive it, it can be really helpful to find a root cause. Because you guys, to be honest, A lot of it stems from childhood. A lot of it stems from like trigger events. And, you know, that could be a physical trigger event of like, believe it or not, having a kid postpartum triggers a lot of things for women in terms of, you know, physical, emotional stuff like that. And if you're just in general, like not super happy in life, you know, I think it's really important to talk to someone, but we always say like, date around with your therapist. You need to find someone that you relate to. You need to find someone that, you know, is a good fit for you. Yep. And so don't settle if it doesn't feel like it's a connection. You know, don't settle if you feel like it's not something that you're finding improvement with. So just a little caveat there. But anyways, remember, there is good stress. There is bad stress. And if you have a lot of stress that seems to be driving your body into the ground, you need to add more good to balance the equation. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you implement some of these things, you know, in the near future. They can never hurt. But at the end of the day, guys, we got to control the stress. We need to be able to control those things because that's how we control our health.